Awesome, Russell. Seems like we are live now. I'm gonna make you host again, and then please make me co-host.
Good. Glad to know we're going live.
Awesome. Just make me co-host, and that is it.
There you go. Hi, Norma.
Good morning.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I really enjoyed your classes this
Good.
week. And
Good.
I've signed up for all the others.
Oh, great. Great.
Yeah.
And there's some more to come yet. I'm developing still some more classes. I just don't have enough time to get them all off the ground yet.
Yeah, they're very interesting. I would like to, do some traveling down Mexico way.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I really encourage people to go. I don't know if anyone heard Mark Miller speak yesterday at noon. He was a guest speaker talking about disruption in work and industry.
Oh, yes.
He's an expatriate in Jijic, Mexico. He's from Austin. And he said to someone said to him, "Boy, isn't it dangerous in Mexico?" And he said, "Wow, isn't it?" And this person who spoke to him was from New Jersey. And he said, "Wow, I read about all the murders in Chicago." And the guy said, "Well, that's thousands of miles. It's 1,000 miles away from me." And he said, "Well, the same thing's true for me too. It's a perfectly safe place." So
yeah.
And I consider Mexico a very safe place. So I'm going there later this year. Probably my first out of the country trip this year will be to Mexico. Though we were discussing this morning, someone asked me about how to what advice I could give about putting a SIM card in my phone for traveling abroad. And I said, I'd be very happy to do research and go to Ireland and get one in my phone and then travel all through Europe to see if it works everywhere. So I'll not quite the time to do that, but
Job-related expenses.
Travel-related expenses, work-related expenses. Great to have everybody here. It's good to see Susan and Chris and Karen and Darla and Barbara and Terry, Joyce, Gina, Mara, Arlene, Carolyn, Kathy, Jeannie, and we have one phone number, begins 1214. If you wouldn't mind, if you're able to rename yourself. I know sometimes people are dialing in on the phone because they're on their way somewhere. That's understandable. But if you're able to rename yourself, that's great. Then we can call you by name in case you ask a question. And this is a good class for participation. This is a really good class for participation. And I'm especially looking for anyone who has been a solo traveler or would like to be a solo traveler for participation. The experienced solo travelers can tell us about some of their solo travel experiences. And those who would like to travel solo, you would like to travel and you're going to go solo, to ask questions. So we can have a give and take and a back and forth. And I'm really glad to have everyone here today. We're going to give it about 2 more minutes for everyone to join in. But meanwhile, while we're waiting, if you wouldn't mind putting into the chat your interest in the class today, and it could be something like, I'm interested in traveling solo, or I just travel a lot and want to talk about travel, or I'm an experienced solo traveler and I'd be happy to share some experiences. That would be a help to me. So I get an idea of why people are in the class today. So if you don't mind putting that in the chat, you can also put in the chat while you're doing that, where you're from. We get an idea where all the other learners are calling in or dialing in today from. And if anybody's joined in the last bit and you don't have your name in there, if you wouldn't mind renaming yourself. Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for renaming yourself. Good to see you. And let's just check. We've got a few responses already. Let's see. Susan loves the discussions about travel. Thank you, Susan. Good to have you here. Karen says you've traveled solo, but always love learning from others. I learned something from every class I've attended. Super glad to hear that, Karen. You have a lot to share, so we'll look to you to share anything of your experience today, Karen. Mara is a solo traveler and would love to know other perspectives. She's from Dallas. Great, Mara. I might ask you for some of your perspectives, so you're welcome to share them. Jeannie has ideas to save money as a solo traveler. Good point. I've even thought of just doing an entire class on how to travel frugally. If anybody listened to Rick Steves' podcast, so this is not the live event he did with us, though he might have mentioned it in the live event. I get the two mixed up because I listened to his a podcast done with I Built This. So I'm sorry, he does a regular podcast. This is one called I Built This. He talked about touring Europe for the first time, and I'm going to guess it was about 1974, but it might have been 75, and living on like $2 a day and sneaking into museums and eating peanut butter and jelly. It was quite interesting. So a frugal travel class might be one we come up with. So Jeannie asked ideas to save money as a solo travel. Let me give you some ideas today, Jeannie. I'm going to put those down. I'll put that down. Save money. Norma's not traveled solo, but is interested. And Darla wants to go travel solo to Paris. Carolyn wants to re-enter the travel world and concerns of safety. Good point, Carolyn. Actually, there is a class tonight at 7:30 Eastern. I'll be doing a whole class on traveling safely. Jeannie has traveled solo. And Barbara has any tips for female solo travelers, solo supplements on cruises or tours. So any of you female solo travelers out there can give your insights or tips to Barbara in the class today. Kathy wants to know what she's curious how folks have traveled solo, ins and outs. Mara would like to she would like the frugal travel ideas. Good, Mara. We'll do that. We'll definitely do the frugal travel ideas. Yes, Mara mentions also that Rick Steves is great, but that I guess the cost of going alone is more expensive than if you go in pairs. I would believe that. I know a lot of people, and these are actually all women, who do look for companions to travel with. I've met a lot. They wanted to go travel. They found someone else who had a similar interest, and they went. Some of them were people who were married. Maybe their husband did not want to go or was not able to go, and they found someone to go with them. Arlene says she's traveled extensively with her husband and am now alone. She traveled to $5 a day in college. I love that. And she likes to travel independently off the beaten track. Very good, Arlene. I'm going to remember that one because I also find that traveling off the beaten track is one of the best ways to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thanks, everyone who's put something in the chat. And if you joined since I asked, if you would please put in the chat where you're from and what you would like to learn today about solo travel. And especially if you have been a solo traveler, mention that. Or if you would like to travel solo, mention that. So I can make sure we get your questions answered, and I also invite you to ask questions. And I got a few more here. Yes, okay. Karen, I understand the thing about plumbers. Jeannie wants to know the advantage of solo is you can do what you want and not be stuck waiting around for your traveling companions. Yes, Jeannie, that's true. And I'll share a little bit about that. So welcome everyone to Traveling Solo. I am Russ Eanes, your guide. And now hopefully you all see something that says Traveling Solo. That's a bag I've used in the past. I can recommend it, though I don't use it anymore. It's a little bit smaller than a carry-on, has a zip-on knapsack. So it's a handy way to bring your knapsack, and has wheels on the bottom. You can actually open the back of it up here and put it on your back, but I never did when I traveled with it. That's why I don't use it anymore. I'm Russ Eanes, your guide. I'm from Harrisonburg, Virginia. I'm an experienced traveler, including being a solo traveler. I'm a writer, a walker, and a cyclist. I formerly was a book publisher, and when I was a publisher, my best thing was to help authors shape their ideas into a book. Right now, I'm a full-time guide with Get Set Up, and I'm doing it because I love all the energy I get from working with older learners. Get Set Up does help you learn useful skills from people like you. And boy, we had some great testimonials this morning of all the skills people are learning. I think we learned this morning in a class together about how to use your iPhone, or how to use a phone for travel, mobile phone. I happen to have an iPhone. That's what I was using. But then people kept saying, and then I told them all these other classes you could learn, go to and learn about how to use your mobile phone for all sorts of things. So hopefully people will find those classes and sign up for them. We learn from each other. Ideally, we can see you and your cameras are on. You can request a recording of this class after the class. You can email help@getsetup.io. And if you're joining by live stream, the best way to participate is to join us and register for a class. That way you can be here live and ask your questions. And lastly, Get Setup's not paid to promote any specific products. I will say today, if you have questions, also please put them in the chat. I'll also stop at points and invite questions. So I really look forward to your participation in that. This is a picture of me from my longest solo travel, which I did in 2018. And I'll explain a little bit about my solo travel after I explain this photograph. This was on the Camino de Santiago. I left home on March 27th, and on March 29th, I started walking 500 miles across northern Spain. It took me 5 weeks to walk about 100 miles a week. And I was glad to go alone. I was a solo pilgrim, and I met lots of other people along the way, but I did miss my wife, and I'm glad to say that she came and joined me for the last 10 days of my travel. This is a picture of me on a solo trip in Trier, which is a city in Germany. Trier was once upon a time the capital, or the center sort of the power of the Roman Empire. As I have traveled in Europe over the last decade and a half, I've discovered that the Romans were everywhere. Every time I turned around, either in Scotland or in England or Germany or France or Spain, and of course Italy, there were the Romans. Well, one of the reasons that I have traveled solo over the years is because I have an interest in ancient ruins and ancient sites and in history. And it's an interest that my wife shares with me only a little bit. And so many times when I've had the opportunity, she has encouraged me to go ahead and take a trip by myself. That hasn't been very often. Often I've done it at the front end or the back end of a trip with my wife, or the front end or the back end of a trip for my work. I never just, except for going on the Camino de Santiago, I never just went somewhere by myself. But even then, my wife joined me at the end. In this case, I was in Germany for work. I went to Germany in 2014, 15, and 16 to attend the Frankfurt Book Fair, the Buchmesse, which is the world's largest book fair. And while I was there, I decided I had to go by myself for work. Though in 2016, my wife went with me. So 2014 and 15, I went by myself. And each time I tacked on some time at the end of my trip or at the beginning of my trip to travel a little bit by myself, because I was interested in seeing some historical sites in Germany that I knew my wife might not be as interested in seeing. So I read quite a bit about German history and Roman history, and I discovered that the city of Trier, which is about maybe a 3-hour drive from Frankfurt, was a place with all sorts of interesting Roman ruins, including a building that the Romans put up in the 1st century, which is still standing. It had been repurposed over the centuries by various rulers, including Napoleon in the 19th century. and I wanted to visit those places. So my wife said, sure, why don't you stay on a few extra days? Your work's already paying for you to travel over and back and just travel around at my own expense and on my own time and see some sites in Germany. So I did that 2 years in a row, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing these different parts of Germany and these different historical sites. So one of the advantages of traveling solo, and someone has pointed this out, is that you get to be your own travel guide. You can decide where you want to go and when you want to go and what you want to see each day when you're traveling on your own. The downside of that is that if you are going somewhere particularly spectacular and you have some significant others that you wish could share that with you, well, you are not able to share it with them. So that is the one downside of that, being able to go wherever you want, whenever you want, of being a solo traveler. In this case, I wish my wife could have seen Trier, but she wouldn't have been as interested in it as me. So I was glad to go by myself. Another thing you need to get expert in doing if you travel solo is making your own travel plans. Now, I'm going to be doing a whole class on how to plan your own travel. That's going to come up in a few weeks. I touch on it in some of my other travel classes about different sites and different apps I use to plan travel and to keep track on my travel. I enjoy planning travel. I enjoy doing the research. I enjoy figuring out where I need to go. I tend to use mass transit when I go somewhere. I would never drive a car by myself in England. That would feel like a death wish. Not because there's anything the matter with the British drivers, but because when you're driving on the left side of the road, it takes all your energy, all your mental energy, all your attention to keep an eye on the road and knowing where you're going down that stretch of road. And if you need to do some bigger navigation, well, for me, that would be too much. And I even found that was true in Germany because it was kind of hard for me to understand some of the road signs or finding street signs. So you can use a GPS. That is one thing that is available to you. But since then, I've just ditched the cars and I travel by train, mass transit, bus, anything. And that's the kind of research I'd like to do ahead of time. What is the mass transit? What are the bus schedules? And these things are generally all online. And if you can't find them online, if anybody was in our top 10 travel tips Monday, you'll know that tip number 10 is find the tourist information office, because the tourist information office is the place that will have all the information you need, including travel schedules. So when I'm planning my travel, and I'm in a big enough city or town, and really, if it's any size of a town that has tourists, and remember, there are towns which have many more tourists than people who live there, probably potentially most of the cities in the world that get tourists have more visitors than people that live there. Even the smallest of towns will have a tourist information office where you can go and get some information like this. So that's one of the things about traveling by yourself that you have to get used to, making your own travel plans. One other thing you have to do when you're traveling by yourself is you have to watch your own back. So if you've got valuables or things you need to keep track of, like your passport, you have to devise ways yourself to make sure you know where those things are at all times. This is a picture from a time. I think I told the story the other day that I left my passport in the global entry kiosk at Dulles International Airport when I was coming into the country. Of course, I was tired. It was a long day. When you take an overseas flight coming back this way, it tends to be a long day because often if you get up early to catch a flight and then it's maybe 8 or 9 hours in the air and then you get off the plane and then it's only mid-afternoon where you've arrived and you're ready to go to bed, you might forget something. I left my passport in the kiosk, and 2 days later I had to go to Canada. Fortunately for me, my wife phoned the Customs and Border Patrol office at the airport and found out, yes, indeed, they had my passport. And if I could come and show enough identification when the day I was flying to Canada, they would return it to me. And so they did. And so I'm kissing my passport because that's one thing that I was really glad to have. No passport, no flight to Canada. So when you're traveling alone, you got to trust your own methods to keep track of everything that you have. I'm going to stop the share here for a minute and just share a few other ideas about traveling solo. And then I'm going to invite some questions from those of you who would like to travel solo. We mentioned that one of the nice things about traveling solo is you can go where you want, when you want. And that is one thing that many of us have great memories of, are the places that we wanted to go. Some of the risks about traveling by yourself are safety. And one time when I was traveling to Germany by myself, I was accosted in a train station, outside of a train station, by a few young men. Normally there are crowds around and you never have to worry about that. But I was walking across the plaza just outside the train station, and it was very early in the morning, like 6:30 a.m. I had actually taken a fast train there that left at 5:30. And there was no one around. I managed to bumble around with enough German that they left me alone. But one of the risks about traveling solo is you do have to keep track of your things, and you have to figure out how to be safe. And I think for women, that's a bigger concern than it is for men. And I want to acknowledge that, since I'm a man sharing about traveling solo. And so maybe some of the women who are in the class here today who have done solo travel might share some of your tips for keeping safe. Anybody out there want to share a tip or thought about keeping safe as a solo traveler?
I don't go anywhere where I don't feel comfortable. There's not a lot of people. I had one of my cruises I went on, I had planned on going sightseeing where you could walk to. And I hit the point where it was a Sunday, so all the stores were closed. There was a lot less people than I expected. And I ended up just turning around and saying, forget it, I wasn't going to go to that site. So just need to be aware of your surroundings. And just like I try to do mass transit, but I also try to blend in with the local people, the local tourists.
Yep.
Not tourists, local people. Not
the local people, right?
Not the tourists. Yeah.
You don't want to stand out as a tourist, is what you're saying, Jeannie.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very good. Susan.
I have not ever traveled completely alone, where I've just set off and gone somewhere and had no one to turn to. But I often travel alone to join a group somewhere. And usually it's a small group where I have a lot of flexibility to either go with the group or go off and do something else that I would prefer to do. And then also have sort of a guide that's with the group who can make arrangements for me if I need that, or just make some suggestions and help me out in that respect. So I feel like I'm getting the best of both worlds. I'm able to, without hurting anyone's feelings, I'm able to go off by myself and do something, or I'm able to go with the group and have people to join with if I want to do that. So that's kind of my take on solo travel. I usually fly by myself and navigate all that kind of stuff by myself, but have a group to turn to where I am.
Very good.
So I have traveled around the world solo, and the only reason is because I got tired of asking. My rule is ask 3 people I know if they want to go on a trip, and if I get 3 no's, then I just go solo. And I'll say that my advice for women as a female solo traveler sort of comes from experience and things that have happened to me that have been really bad. I've learned from it, and that's kind of why I'm better. So I'll say that one time in Paris, I'm pretty savvy. I watch my back. But for 2 seconds, I put my cell phone in my right pocket as I was putting my ticket through the turnstile to get on the metro. And in those 2 seconds that my phone wasn't in my hand and it was in my jacket pocket, which was close to my body, someone had come up and stolen my phone. So from then on, I have a thing called a bandolier. It's this big strap that goes around crossbody wise, and my cell phone goes in it. And I can take photos with my cell phone, but my cell phone is always on a crossbody with a strap, and it's always on me. I never remove it. So my phone is really important when you're traveling solo, is to have your cell phone. And to have it stolen on a trip is really expensive and just frustrating and terrifying and things like that. And then also another girlfriend at a restaurant in Italy had put her purse on her chair behind her. She had a crossbody purse, and somebody had stolen her purse. And from that, I now carry these carabiners, which are the climbing kind of snaps. And if I want to sit on a chair, and if my purse is not on me, and I do want to sort of put it on a chair, I use that snap around the strap of my purse to actually snap it to the chair. So if someone comes up and just wants to snatch it, they can't. It's attached to my chair, or it's attached to my belt, or it's attached to something else. So those two things, I'm not going to lie, have been fundamental as a solo female traveler, is protecting your phone and protecting your purse. So I hope that helps somebody.
Great
Yes.
suggestions, Mara.
I have a question. Can you type in the names of those two items that you talked about? One was
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you, Mara.
You're welcome.
Let me get something from Karen, because I know she does have to leave early. Go ahead, Karen. You're muted.
I want to ditto what Mara said. I've traveled internationally solo extensively, and I wear touching me at all times my money belt, my phone. I never carry a purse, but my cell phone, I have a certain contraption that I've made that has it's in a case, and it's on a certain belt, and I wear it. And even in summer weather, I wear the belt with the phone touching me, the case is touching me at all times. I never do anything without my cell phone not being on me. And I do not carry a purse of any sort, or no jewelry, no fancy clothes. I dress pretty horribly when I travel alone, and I've never been accosted. So, but so that's again, but the safety factor is wearing everything of valuable for me, wearing it, and then having something over it. Even in summer, I have a very lightweight little vest I can wear over my outfit. So.
Very good suggestion. Yeah, one of the things, and I've heard this from other women, so as a man, it's maybe less of a concern, is you don't need to bring so much stuff with you when you're walking around. And I don't know if you can see it, I'm wearing a fleece that has a pocket up here, a breast pocket, and I can put my cell phone in there. And it's really hard for anybody to get it off of me. One of the things that I always advise people to do when you're traveling is just watch out, just having your phone in your hand and walking around or doing something with it if you're in a place that's not safe. If you're in a place that's safe, don't worry about it. But if you're in a crowd or a place where it may not be safe, don't be walking around holding it like this, or just have a conversation, my daughter's had a cell phone stolen from her on the subway by somebody who just pulled up to a stop, walked up to her, bumped their hand so that it went up and came in and grabbed it out of the air and just exited the subway at the stop. So I always tell people, don't use I did teach a class on how to use your mobile phone. You don't need it for everything. More comments or questions about this thing? Well, let's just talk about safety. There is a class tonight, a whole class about safety. So I don't want to just talk about safety, but I really want to field the questions about that, because we have a lot of women here today. Karen, go ahead.
Well, I just would say, and I'm sure most everyone does this, but just as a reminder, wherever you're going, wherever you arrive, the first thing I do is chat up as many people as I can. And one of the questions is, I'm going out tonight, or I'm going tomorrow, I'm solo. Where should I not go? And, the locals will tell you, the concierge will tell you, different people at the hotel. And, that's just something good to ask some of the local people. And in the United States too, when you're visiting cities.
That's right. It's not just for international travel. Yeah, Arlene likes that suggestion.
No, I'm trying to say something.
Oh, go ahead, Arlene.
I thought I was raising my hand to speak.
That's okay.
I'm of the old-fashioned part in that I always traveled with a fanny pack. And that's where my camera went. This was pre-cell phone everything. So I put my camera in there and anything else that was important, and then covered it with a light shirt or something so that it was not easily accessible. And I don't know whether that's out now and you don't possibly wear a fanny pack, but
that's a great idea, I think.
I still see them. And in fact, I've got a son-in-law who carries one as like a crossbody bag. He can put it around his waist, or he can clip it all the way around. I've seen a guy with two of them strapped to his chest while he was traveling. You could put it in front of you, then you really have control of your things. Yeah,
that's right. And depending on where you're going, I usually carry two. One is a big one that can hold a bunch of stuff, and one is just a little flat one where you're taking only what you need to have with you for those hours that you'll be away. So just want to throw out that fanny packs are, for me, they were a lifesaver. I mean, that's what I used.
Carolyn, do you have a question or comment?
Yes. Have you ever had experience with the backpacks that also have a water bag that you can fill, and then it has a line to go around to the front so you can stay hydrated, especially on those walks?
Yes, you're speaking of what they call a camelback, and I actually have a knapsack that goes in. I don't use them myself. They're hard to keep clean, quite honestly. I know a lot of people swear by them, but I just don't like the way you have to keep them clean because it's hard to get them very dry when you're not using them. I tend to buy inexpensive half-liter water bottles when I travel. I'm not into, I don't think bottled water is a good idea globally, but when I travel, I will buy one or two of those, and I'll buy them that are a little bit sturdier. In fact, I think for one of the travel tip classes, I can't remember which class now, maybe it was the how to pack a carry-on. I show you some of the bottles that I've used. Actually, I've collected them here. They're just inexpensive bottles that maybe sparkling water came in or something like that. They're a little bit sturdier plastic. Nothing that cost me any money other than the water that I bought in it. And those are also, I can figure I can dispose of them, or if I lose them, I'm not worried. So I tend to prefer those small water bottles, and you can fill as many as you need. So if you need 1.5 liters of water, you can fill 3 of them.
Russ, which app is good for foreign language while traveling? A question from Darla.
Yes, very good question. I love Google Translate. And in our class this morning on using your cell phone, I demonstrated Google I pointed out Google Translate, and you can do everything with it from hold a conversation with someone in another language by passing the phone back and forth to using it to read a menu with the camera on it. So Google Translate is definitely the one that I recommend you use. Let's see, Linda, did you have a comment or question? You need to unmute.
Well, I know one thing when I travel, sometimes I wear earplugs, even though I don't have, it may not be hooked to anything, but sometimes if you're talking, they don't know if you're talking to somebody or not, and they think you're talking. If I get around a group, I'll start talking, and they think I'm talking to somebody, and I'm not. And I also wear this band. It's like a keychain that it has a noise on it. So if somebody would attack me, it would go off.
There you go. That's a way to keep safe. I don't want to get away from how to keep safe, but there is a whole class in that we're doing tonight. So I welcome you to come back to that. But I'd like to talk about some other topics about traveling solo, which are good recommended places to stay, and also ways that a solo traveler might plan. One thing you can do when you're traveling solo of any age is stay in a hostel. And I always thought of them as just places for young people because they're called youth hostels. But I've stayed, when I walked in the Camino de Santiago, of course, I stayed in the Spanish equivalent of the hostel, which is the albergue. But even after that, I started going to various places around the world, in Italy and in Scotland. And I started looking up hostels and found them to be very nice places to stay. They were also places where you could meet other travelers from around the world. By the way, Airbnb is also a good way to meet people from around the world. But you can keep your valuables safe in a hostel. If you just check and make sure they have a place to lock up things when you're gone during the day. And I've learned to travel with earplugs. That's why when Linda mentioned earplugs, I'll wear earplugs at night in a hostel or albergue to drown out the noise. But it's a very inexpensive way to travel and to stay somewhere as a solo. Otherwise, Airbnb is also a good place because you can get a room in a house that maybe was just one bed very easily with Airbnb. And I see that Mara has mentioned carabiner, which is very nice. Thank you for putting in carabiner. I actually bring several carabiners with me when I travel, ways to hook things to myself.
What is that? A carabiner? What is
It's
that?
it's a clip that they use. You'll see mountain climbers have them. They have a clip that has part of it comes in like this, and then they snap shut. And so you can clip things together very quickly. And I bring a couple with me, and I actually attach my phone, my camera to my knapsack with a carabiner. That way it's always outside and accessible. This is where I'm going to be doing a lot of photography, and it's very quickly accessible to get a hold of. Then I can clip it back on. But you can clip various things to yourself with a carabiner. And I'm sorry, now I'm forgetting who it was. Was it Mara Mara says she clips. Was it Mara that said she clips her purse to the chair with a carabiner? That's a great idea. More questions about planning a trip by yourself or what to do when you're traveling. Some people have said, we had a great observation last week from one of our seasoned travelers who attends these classes, mentioned that sometimes when you go into a restaurant by yourself, you feel self-conscious. Oh my gosh, there's everybody else in pairs or groups eating meals. What must they think of me? And she discovered that they weren't thinking about her at all, that she sat and she looked around the room while she was eating, and she realized nobody was paying attention to her. And that immediately got rid of all her self-consciousness. I've really enjoyed that. I've enjoyed coffee shops in Europe. I've traveled quite a bit in Europe. They often like to go into a cafe in the later afternoon, like 5-6 o'clock, because they eat supper later. And that's often the time to have a glass of wine and maybe a little hors d'oeuvre or something like that. And that's a good chance when you're sitting by yourself to observe what's going on. If you want to just do some people watching and observe the culture. Linda, did you have another question or comment?
I do.
And I'll come to you, Darla.
Okay.
Ma'am, what I wanted to ask is, if you want to go somewhere like out of the country, how can you find rates that are more flexible for a one person? Because usually you have to go in groups to save money.
Yes. Well, that is one of the challenges of traveling solo, is that often groups can travel cheaper. When it comes to public transportation, generally it's the same price no matter how many people there are. There are, like I said, Airbnb or hostels that will often give a single room for a single as cheaply as they would, if a double room would be twice what a single room is. So those are good places. I would say Airbnb and also hostels are good places to find inexpensive beds for solo travelers.
How do you know if the water's safe to drink? I've been in places where you better not drink the water.
You better inquire when you get there right away. Or I would say even better, inquire before you go if you know that might be an issue. For example, that's often an issue in going to Mexico. So you want to have bottled water when you're in Mexico.
Even in the Holy Land, we couldn't drink the water.
Okay, very good. That is something that you should find out before you get there, so you don't take a drink when you step off the plane and get sick.
And a lot of times, oh, I'm sorry.
Darla had a question or comment.
Okay, I was just wondering, I've never done a hostel. So tell me, what is that like? Is it like bunk beds or is it safe? I mean, I guess I'm just not quite sure about that if you're traveling alone.
It's the whole range, Darla. It can be a bunk in a dorm. It can be single sex. It can be co-ed. It can be a single room. Most hostels have all those options. And there are lots of sites online to research hostels. So I would say,
do you know any website where you can find other solo travelers to travel with? A question from Mauro.
yes. The way I would say to find other solo travelers actually is either on online forums for that particular travel place or on actually Facebook groups. I'm a member of something like 50 Facebook groups, and probably 25 to 30 of them are travel related. And when my wife and I, or I'm alone, have traveled somewhere and it's related, there's a Facebook group related to it, I've announced well before I've gone that I'm planning on going to such and such a place and the dates. And I've found people that are going to be there at the same time, and we've met. So that is one of the best ways to find other travelers who are solo. And I would say that's a good use of Facebook. If you are on Facebook, you can also use other travel forums that might be, there are various travel forums related to particular destinations. And you might get on that forum and look for, search for discussion threads about solo travelers. Let's say you're going to Thailand. If there's a forum about traveling to Thailand, I bet there is one. You could go there and search for forums about solo travelers. You can also get advice as a solo traveler. When I was preparing to walk the Camino de Santiago, I was on some forums and Facebook groups, and on the forums I discovered that there were lots of them about solo travelers. In fact, I think if you go to the Camino de Santiago discussion forum, you'll find that walking as a solo pilgrim is one of the top topics that you can search for threads on.
Russ, I have a comment about the water. I got sick on one trip. I'm not going to name the destination, but when I went to Morocco last year, I took with me the Sawyer mini water filter, and I even used it for bottled water, where you just put water in it and you just squeeze it, and it has a filter system. And I even use it now at home rather than buying bottled water. So that's a really good alternative for making sure that your water is safe.
Thank you for sharing that. Gina, do you think you could put the name of that in the chat?
Sure. And hikers usually use it for water in streams. So that way they can always have fresh water available to them.
That's probably similar to something I've used in this country, which is a special filter, and it's attached to a little pump, and you put the one end with a filter, or you put the one end into the water and it pumps the water up through a tube. It goes through the filter and comes out the other end, and you can fill a water bottle with it.
This is a little bit easier and less complicated.
It sounds like it is, Gina. Yeah,
I'm a line dancer, and our line dancing, and they were from all over though, New York, Illinois. We went on a cruise to the Caribbean, and she's had other cruises too. But that's a good way. And there was a group of quilters there. I imagine you could go with a photography class or group. I'm in a photography class also group, but you could look for groups that are traveling, so you're not solo.
I'll give another example. Last year, I biked from Pittsburgh to Washington. It's about 335 miles on Rails to Trails. And there is a Facebook group dedicated to those Rails to Trails. In fact, I do a class on that. I think it'll be next week. No, it's actually tomorrow at 4:00, a Rails to Trails adventure. I'll talk about that, biking from Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C. There's a Facebook group dedicated to that, and people put out on that group all the time that they're going. I did that. And along the way, I met all sorts of people that said, we saw your posting about there. We've been looking for you. So, and then again, I took that trip solo because I was writing a book about it. So those are that's why one of the best ways, get on those Facebook groups. And if not a Facebook group, there are also forums online that you can find about traveling to some of those places. More comments and questions about travel planning, experiences traveling solo.
Yeah, I have something. I know cruises are not really happening right now, but there's certain cruise lines that do gear towards solo travelers. I had gone on a couple with Royal Caribbean that I just looked for a cheap single supplement. Anything when I was in NCL, and they, even though I didn't get solo, they had solo meetups. So you met people and you had dinner with them. And, you know, there were several of us that sort of hung out at different activities, either on the ship or, you know, on sightseeing activities. And then when we disembarked, I had met a lady who was on the same flight back to Detroit that I was on. So we hung out the last day in Florida together and went sightseeing in Florida. So, you know, it's not like you have to be 100% alone the entire time if you're traveling solo.
Also,
Thank
to
you.
add to that, people tend to approach a single person as opposed to if you're with other people. So I have found that people have come up to me. I'm just talking about women, couples, families, and they just start talking to you. I was on the train in Italy and I had all this luggage. I know, Russ, I wasn't supposed to have it. And I was with a group of women. They were going to work, Italian women, and one just picked up my bag and just helped me off the train. And people tend to be friendlier, I think, to solo travelers as opposed to if you're with a group of people or if you're with another person.
I'd be leery of somebody actually carrying your property. I really would.
Well, first of all, I'm a New Yorker, so I kind of have a sense about these things. And this woman there were a group of women, you can tell they had business attire and they were being helpful. I could tell that they were being helpful. I was right behind her. She was sitting next to me and she was like 2 inches away from me. So I felt comfortable with that.
Thanks, Gina. Thanks, Cease, for both of you for your comments and ideas. We got just a couple.
About bus tours. I did a bus tour of Netherlands, and that way I was single. I was by myself on the trip, but I was with 28 other people on the bus. You know, and everybody looked after everybody, and I had my own room every night for a week, and we did a week or 2 weeks. We did a whole circle of the Netherlands.
On bus.
On bus, yeah.
Very
and
good.
They would stop with smokers every now and then, and they would stop for lunch, and they'd stop for dinner and a hotel room. And not once did I ever have a bad room, you know.
Very good.
Yeah.
Any more solo travel questions or experiences? Christine.
Hi. Yeah, my first trip to Paris, my sister sent me when I was 60 because it was my dream to go all my life. And so because I live in Seattle, I signed up for Rick Steves, who I'd heard about. I'd been to all his classes and workshops for 10 years, getting myself prepared. So I signed up for a group, which was 7 days in Paris. And it turned out to be a group of 24 Americans from all over the country. We all stayed in the same hotel, which was wonderful. Our tour guide, who was a French tour guide, was in the hotel with us. So if we needed anything, because I'm a private person, I paid the difference. It was worth it to have a room to myself. And I would definitely do that again if I traveled solo, because I'm happy to pay for the privacy to be able to do what I want. But I actually flew in 3 days early to get acclimated, which I'm grateful I did. And the tour started on a Sunday, ended on Saturday, and I stayed 2 more days again just to see Paris on my own. But I loved it because we could eat breakfast together if we chose, but we spent the day. Most days we would have a half day. Sometimes we would have a whole day. But I liked the fact that we got acclimated to where we were. We were 5 blocks from the Eiffel Tower. We had 3 dinners together as part of the tour. All our transportation was covered. We got familiarized immediately with the subways, how to get around on our own if we chose to, or we could buddy up with someone. But I had a wonderful experience. So I felt so good about doing this on my own. The next year I went back by myself for 10 days. And I did fine because I felt like I really knew Paris, felt it was very easy to do on my own, and I felt very comfortable.
Thanks, Christine. You answered the question I was about to ask you, because I knew that after you did that Rick Steves tour, you did a solo trip, and that's actually a good insight. Take a tour with like a Rick Steves tour, which my sister's taken them. I haven't met anyone yet who didn't like the Rick Steves tour they'd been on. And then you kind of understand where you're going, what it's like. You kind of know the ropes, and then you can go back by yourself. And I think that's a great insight, and it's a great lesson. And I should put that in the notes. It's someone's put it in the chat. Good idea. Try and take a Rick Steves tour. That's a good way to kind of practice traveling solo. Is go solo on a tour, and then go solo by yourself. Because when you travel to a place multiple times, and I'll give an example, is Frankfurt. So I went there 3 years in a row for work. The first time I did all the research, what's the mass transit, where are the hotels? Actually, I stayed in Airbnb. What part of town is what, and where are the good restaurants, and where are certain shops I want to go to. And so the next year I came back, I knew exactly where I was going to stay, and I knew exactly what to do when I got off the plane. I knew which train to take into the center of town. And by the third year, I felt like a pro. And in fact, there were some things that I shopped for every year when I went there. I'm a stamp collector, and I would get a blank stamp book every year in this one shop, just because why not? It was fun. And it was when I showed them to my grandchildren, I could say, and I bought the book in Frankfurt and the stamps in Germany. Jeannie, do you have a comment or question? You're muted.
I try to do the hop on, hop off trolley type tours if I'm not on a group tour, just to get an idea of where things are, how easy it is to get around things. But I also had a question for anybody, how to deal with the solo supplement, because I know I had looked into hostels, and it seems like Europe, that's a great option, but where I've looked into hostels in the US, they haven't been rated very well. So I have not done any hostels in the US. But
can you explain a solo supplement?
Like if you go like on a cruise ship, if it's like the cruise is $500, it's usually priced out at $500 for 2 people. And then if you're single, you still pay $500. So you're paying 100% supplement.
I understand.
Same thing with a hotel. Hotel is you're paying for a room for 2 people, only one.
I was in a hostel and outside of San Francisco. And it was like a dorm situation. And so there were no supplements for singles or doubles or whatever. There was one room that had bunk beds for women, and the other side was men. Although I learned a hard lesson there, I did not know how to ask the people for where to park your money when you went in to take a shower. And I got wiped out.
Wow.
So I would definitely ask when you check in where to leave your valuables, even to take a shower, because I had no place to hide it, and I wound up somebody took it.
Yeah, because I did walk by one or two in a couple of cities, and I can't remember which cities they were in, but to just check out what they were like on the outside. And I would be afraid to go in there and stay, just with how it looked. It didn't look very well kept. So I usually stick with hotels.
Okay, the one I was in was well kept.
Yeah.
And that would have been in the 80s. But maybe you get a sense from the outside in the neighborhood. This one was located in the woods on the marine land north
Oh,
of,
okay.
San Francisco.
I think
So-
I know exactly where you mean.
Okay, yeah.
Marion County.
I can
there's
give
a-
you one,
with
Yeah,
big white
Marion.
buildings.
one last little bit of advice, and then we probably have to go, about showering and using the bathroom in a hostel. And I learned this from a trucker that I met on the Camino de Santiago. He does a lot of it all over Europe. He showed me that he has a waterproof stuff sack that he can carry into the shower, because a lot of these hostels have shower cubicles. You close them and you can hang up your clothes and towel and everything in there. And he puts all his valuables in that bag, takes it in the shower with him, and it can't get wet because it's waterproof. So that's just one little bit of advice. You were a great group. I enjoyed everyone's input, and I will make sure you get some notes with some of these links that are in the chat in case you haven't saved the chat. You can save the chat. If you go on the chat bubble, there's a little square in the bottom right that has 3 dots in it. If you click on that, you can save the chat. But I'll also make sure some of these things get in the notes to you. And I appreciate having everyone here today. And if you are interested more about traveling safely, come back tonight to the class at 7:30. Hope to see you then.
I want to mention that you could also travel with a friend. Like there's a group from the bank that go together to travel different places, or go with a relative. My daughter and I went to Sweden and Norway and Denmark, and it was wonderful to be together to do that experience.
Thanks for sharing that, Jeannie. I appreciate that.
That was Cease.
Sorry, Cease.
That's okay.
Thanks, Cease. I looked at the wrong name. I appreciate that,
That's okay.
Cease. Have a good
See you
afternoon, everybody. I'll see some of you this evening, perhaps.
You too.
Thanks.
Good class.
Thanks for sharing, everyone. Bye.